And just like that, we are live on the internet. How's it going, Respect?
Are we live? I don't know. I feel like it's been a lifetime.
It feels like a lifetime. You know, without you, without that song, I don't know how we've gotten by, but I've somehow managed. I mean,
hearing it's very cathartic.
Yeah, my hair has grown. I've gotten gray hair now. I've had a birthday probably. I don't know. I'm older. I'm from the 20th century. I think it's been a while.
Yeah, 20th century. And we were just talking. My daughter, my 8-year-old, asked me when I was born, and I told her 1975, and she went, "Whoa, that's a long time ago." Yep, and I'm feeling every bit of it. I think so.
Yeah.
Well, we went to the movies last night. We saw The Haunted Mansion.
Oh yeah, how was it?
I liked it. It was like if you're a Disney fan, you'll love it. So if you go to Disney World and you're familiar with the ride, it's kind of like a love note to the ride, which is one of my favorite rides. And yeah, and my wife and I, being the nerds we are, we have matching shirts that say she's my foolish mortal and he's my foolish mortal. So of course we wore it to the movie, being the nerds that we are. And it was a lot of fun. And
nice.
But my daughter brought her friend, who we haven't seen in a while because she's been really busy doing competitive dance and stuff. So she really hadn't been around. So she hadn't seen me with glasses. And she was shocked. She's like, "Why are you wearing glasses?" I'm like, because I have a disease called CSS. And she's like, "Oh, what's that?" And I'm like, "Can't see shit." And I was like, comes with being older.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So I didn't ask you actually, and I'm scared for the answer. Have you seen Oppenheimer?
Twice.
Oh, you liked it?
Oh my God, I loved it.
Yeah.
That movie, I took Lorelai went with me the second time. I saw it in IMAX, which if you're gonna see it, you got to see it in IMAX.
It's really good. Yeah.
I saw it the first time in just regular release because my family went to go see Barbie, and I was not going to go do that. I was not subjecting myself to that.
I want to see Barbie. I'm excited for it.
Well, from what I hear, it's good. So now I'm like, oh, maybe I should have gone.
No, I'm going to go.
So I chose to go to Oppenheimer while they were at Barbie, but the movie's Oppenheimer is an hour longer.
Yeah.
So we had to be creative in how we scheduled it so that we could all be there at the same time. And when I saw it the first time, I just was by myself, and I'm like, oh my God, I love this movie. And I know a lot about the Manhattan Project and that whole time frame. I was always very interested in it. And being a science nerd, like I told my wife when I got out, I was like, every scientist they named, I was like I geeked out about. And it was kind of like a kid collecting baseball cards. It's like, oh, there's my favorite, oh my God, Fermi, and oh my God, Lawrence, and oh my God, Edward Teller. I'm like, they're so perfect. And
I feel like Edward Teller I've heard of. Why do I know who that is?
He's the inventor of the H-bomb.
Okay, is that why I know that is?
Yeah. He's big. And the thing that struck me about that movie is that I couldn't pick a bad performance in there.
The acting was phenomenal.
It was off the charts good. And after I saw it the first time, as I'm walking out, I was telling the girls, especially Abby, because Abby's a big movie nut. I'm telling her everyone who's in it. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, Abby, all of Hollywood was in this movie.
They were. It was crazy.
And I was going through all the parts, and she's like, yeah, but what about Gary Oldman? I'm like, Gary Oldman wasn't in it. And she's like, yes, he was. And I'm like, no, he wasn't. And she goes, Daddy, yes, he was. He was President Truman. I'm like, what?
Oh, no way.
Yes. So when I went to go see it the second time, I'm like, holy crap, that is Gary Oldman.
Wow. I had no idea.
Like, give him a supporting actor for that, man. I didn't even know he's Gary Oldman.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like, if that's the job of an actor, man, wow, did you do a great job? Like, give him all the awards. But I think Robert Downey Jr. was amazing.
He was great.
And Cillian Murphy was just he was just so good. And I've seen so many interviews with Oppenheimer, and I had like they have old lectures of his, just really bad recordings sometimes you can get, which are almost unintelligible. He was really hard to understand. Like even people who took his classes always commented that you couldn't understand what he was saying. In fact, there's a funny story. One of his students who went on to have a pretty good career in physics wrote a memoir and said, "I'd like to say what I learned from Oppenheimer, but I can't really recall because he's like, I used to remember raising my hand. I'm like, was that a secret, Oppie? Because I don't understand what you're saying." So apparently he talked very fast and kind of mumbled through his lectures and stuff. So, but and the movie was really accurate. There was very little that I could nitpick from it, and really prior to this, the only other movie that really covered that in depth was Fat Man and Little Boy, which was terrible. If you've never seen it, don't, because it has Paul Newman in it, which is great, but it is so bad. It's so you actually should watch it as a comparison and be like, yeah, this is how movies shouldn't be done.
So I had two nitpicks. I'd like to hear your thoughts on them.
Go ahead.
One is the seemingly endless montage that the beginning of the movie is. Where for a minute I'm like, is this going to be the whole movie? Are we just going to montage the whole first, like the whole film? But then it kind of slows down and
right.
It kind of settles more into like a regular movie. But there's a lot of like shots of him just like looking at like atoms exploding for a while, and then like it moves on to like, you know, the college stuff. But it's just like this really fast, kind of janky like montage thing happening for the first like, I don't know, 30 minutes or more, maybe. I don't know. It goes on for a while, and that part threw me off. I was like, okay, like, do I need another shot of him in bed looking up into space? You know, like what is going on here? You know, so there's that. And the other part you can help me with because I wasn't sure what to take. So there's the scene where he's in the courtroom, making fun of Robert Downey Jr.'s character, essentially, and he's telling a joke like, yeah, you could use, you could use a piece of bread, right? But you know, it's more better than that, or you know, you could use a beer, but you know, right? That's what he's talking about. And he's funny, and everybody's laughing, right? And he's charming, and like, and whatnot. And I assumed that the reason they did that is because there's a real life video clip of him doing that. Like, I assume that's public record.
It is.
And so he's emulating a real thing that happened, right?
Yes, that really happened.
Exactly. Okay. So that's what I assumed, which I apparently I'm correct about that. But what's interesting is, so here we have him emulating a real thing that happened, probably accurately, right? But he's not like that in the rest of the movie, where he's not emulating a real thing that happened. Like for the rest of the movie, he's like stoic, awkward. Like I couldn't imagine the dude in the rest of the movie cracking a joke to save his life. But the guy in the courtroom was charming and funny, and I like I said, I assume the one that is in the courtroom is real because that's based on a real thing that happened. So I found it felt very, that scene felt very out of character. And
it wasn't. It wasn't.
Right.
He was very actually, and this was a comment made about him. He had a public persona that people knew, and then the people who knew him knew what he was really like in private.
Okay.
And you know what's funny is I relate to that, because when I'm out in public and I'm speaking, I'm very effusive and very talkative. But if you have me privately, I'm very quiet, and I'm very stoic, and I tend to keep to myself, which throws a lot of people off. And that's, I will tell you this, that is one of the things that hit me about the movie, is its accurate portrayal of scientists. And so I find it interesting that opening to you was jarring. For me, I related to it.
Well, only because I assumed that one had to be real because, that was public record, and I was like, but you don't see any hint of that in the rest of the movie, which isn't public record,
Yeah, he had a lot of moments like that. He was very persuasive and talkative out in public, especially actually, and he became even more so. Which this is that time frame, by the way. He became even more so when he started talking out against nuclear proliferation. And it is absolutely true that he died with regret because he feels like he really did feel like he basically started the clock towards destruction. That what
I
they
also realized
did.
that
What was
the
that?
movie, the movie, I thought of that too. The movie really doesn't cover like the last chunk of his life.
No, but because the last, I hate to say it, but the last chunk of his life was uneventful because of what had been done to him. And I, I had a long conversation with Lori after the movie, after she saw it with me, because now she's interested in pursuing a career in science. And I told her, I said, this movie represents perhaps better than I've ever seen the relationship of the public to science. And that scene where everyone's stomping and he hears the second time I saw it, like I just saw the brilliance of the movie when he hears the stomping throughout, right? And you're wondering what's that sound, and then you find out that it's the people stomping and everything. You don't hear any narrative, there's no words, but you see him recognizing and relating the weight of the work that he did that these people don't understand. That or most because a lot of people, almost all the people that actually that's not true. Most of the people who are at Los Alamos actually were all scientists, even the ones they had doing clerical work, which they kind of gloss over in the movie. They do mention it. She's like, "Why do they want me typing?"
Right. Yeah, but I have a chemist degree. Yeah.
Right.
Degree.
But the reason they did that is because they wanted to maintain some type of security check. So they wanted to keep as many people out as they could. But that it was so compartmentalized though that most people didn't. Honestly, really, the only people who had the big picture were Lawrence, Groves, and Oppenheimer. Those are the only three in that whole project in Los Alamos who knew everything. And actually, Lawrence wasn't even at Los Alamos. He was working out of Berkeley.
Which one was Lawrence?
Josh Hartnett.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot.
Who also, by the way, is probably one of the most influential American physicists of all time. And he had a falling out with Oppenheimer over all this. Mostly Oppenheimer's opposition to developing the H-bomb. But it's funny because I agree with Lawrence because Oppenheimer, I think, and a lot of scientists they're idealists. And that line by Robert Downey Jr. where and I don't remember it specifically, I just remember the idea of it was that for a guy who could see, the hidden stuff in the universe, he couldn't see this. Right. But that's so typical of a scientist. They get so focused. And so like that beginning where he's seeing the waves and everything, like I totally relate to that, especially when you're doing research. Like when I was doing my research, that's all I saw. All I saw all day was my research, which is actually one of the reasons I didn't want to do it anymore, because it became, like it just consumes your life. So
I understand.
Yeah. And the stuff he was doing, and I don't think the movie really stresses this enough. Europe had embraced quantum theory basically right off the bat. And the reason I think America didn't is because Einstein moved to America. And Einstein didn't, which is ironic because he basically opened the doors to the understanding of quantum theory. And he didn't agree with it. His famous quote, which was used in the movie, God doesn't play dice, was Einstein's rebuke of quantum theory because he didn't believe that probability would be controlling all of this stuff. And he tried in vain to be able to explain relativity without it, and he couldn't. And to come up with a unifying theory, which they couldn't. So all that stuff was really fascinating. The relationship between Einstein and Oppenheimer was great and also pretty realistic. They were friends, although later in life. I don't know if he definitely never gave Einstein the equation for the chain reaction in the atmosphere. That was overblown.
Right. Yeah, I can see him asking Einstein to do the math for him. Like, hey, can you run this for me?
Although it was funny when he says that, our mutual disdain for mathematics, Einstein on record hated math. He was good at it though, which there's this false thing that goes around that Einstein failed math in 8th grade. He didn't. Yeah, that would have never come up. The idea that they could have set off a chain reaction atmosphere to blow up the entire world is actually true. They never did get the probability down to 0, but it was never high enough to consider. And that's something. This is something that the general public doesn't understand. Scientists never deal in absolutes, ever. There's no such. There's basically never an absolute in science. There's very few, and we almost always deal in probability and acceptable risk, right? So there's always.
I mean, there's a probability that my hand can go through the table right now.
Right. Well, I used to use this as an example for my students. Right. That there's a probability I could phase through the floor.
Right.
But it's never going to happen.
Right.
And that's because you have to be able to distinguish between improbable and impossible.
Right.
And a scientist will almost never, ever commit to impossible. So, yes, there was a probability that you could set off a chain reaction in the atmosphere, but it was almost never considered plausible.
Right.
So it was never like a super concern like they made it out in the movie. But yeah, there was a risk. And he did joke, he did make that gallows humor joke with Fermi at Trinity, where Fermi made that bet. That's real. But that was science humor. Like they knew it wasn't going to happen, but like, well, it might, but it wasn't. And yeah, I might phase to the floor too, but I'm not going to. I could instantly teleport across the universe because the atoms that my body are quantum entangled with are somewhere else in the universe. Or the particles, not atoms. But again, it's so improbable that it borders on impossible, but it's not impossible.
That'd be really bad for you if you did, by the way.
Yeah, that would be really bad.
Because the odds of you landing somewhere hospitable for you would be really low.
Is basically as improbable as the action itself.
Yeah, you die immediately.
Yeah. So so there was a lot of depth in the movie, and I appreciate that. And I'm amazed. I didn't like Interstellar. I thought it was garbage, but
I like Interstellar.
I loved it right up to the end.
I get that, but I'm okay with it.
You can't tell me that love is not a force.
Maybe it is.
Love is a chemical construct in our brain.
So, but what about? Have you watched the accidental trilogy of Saving Private Ryan, The Martian, and Interstellar, where you can watch Matt Damon get rescued in more complicated ways 3 times in a row?
I mean, I've seen them all. I've never watched it as a trilogy, but
yeah, it's an accidental trilogy. Yeah.
So, little known fact about ReesSpecht: my second favorite movie of all time is The Martian.
Yeah.
And the director's cut. I'd be hard pressed to choose if you put a gun to my head and told me I had to choose between Shawshank Redemption and that movie. I'd be hard pressed to choose.
In my top 5 is First Man.
Oh, that was a great. I have a hard time with that movie though.
Why?
Just because of the way it goes into his personal experience. So
you don't think it was accurate, or
no? It was, but it hit too close to home for me.
Oh yeah, I get that. That makes sense.
I have the same problem with Gravity.
Right. I never saw Gravity.
Gravity was great, but honestly, I have to say this: I watched it at home, and it lost almost everything for me.
Yeah.
Like Sam didn't see it in the theater with me, so and I saw it in IMAX, and it was just fantastic. The visuals and everything. Even though it got the science wrong, but that's okay. The watching it at home though, and Sam's like, I don't understand. She's like, why'd you like this movie? And it deals with child loss too, so it's like, yeah, that probably wasn't the best movie to watch with you. And she never saw First Man, and I didn't want her to see it because the scene where he throws the bracelet into the crater.
Yeah. It's hard.
I lost it. I started crying out loud in the theater. I was like, "Oh my god, I'm a blustering idiot." So,
but I mean, that obviously, your personal experience aside, it's a tremendous movie though.
It is. It's a great movie, and I mean, I've only seen it the one time because
Right.
I can't build up the nerve to watch it again.
Yeah.
But I loved it, but it was hard. So,
I think it's because like I said, I talk about this movie all the time. One, because I mean, if you had to put a gun to my head, maybe favorite movie, I mean, it's really up there. I loved it so much. But no one's seen it. Like, it's just me.
Yep.
Like, everyone knows Shawshank Redemption, right?
Yep.
Like, everyone and their mother agrees that Shawshank Redemption is a masterpiece that is great. But I literally, whenever I talk about First Man, people, one, have no idea what I'm talking about, and two, definitely haven't seen it. Like, they never heard of it.
Yeah.
I'm like, you haven't seen one Ryan Gosling maybe at his best.
Yep.
And one of the best movies of all time. Like, it's bizarrely good.
It was great, and
I've seen it like 4 times. Like, it's really good.
Yeah, I did love it, and I was just like, it was just hard.
Yeah.
I just remember like it was emotionally draining for me.
No, that makes sense.
And the thing is, I knew Armstrong's history, and I knew about his about his kid and everything. So that wasn't anything new. I just didn't realize the movie was going to focus so much of it around the loss of his child and the effect it had on him. So,
right.
And so that caught me off guard because I was looking forward to it. Hey, let's, my father-in-law worked on the lunar lander. So,
I know that.
Yeah, he worked for GE.
That's cool.
And worked on the was one of the engineers on the instrument panel.
And the fact that on this crazy mission, you're literally on another surface, away from the Earth, and everything's computerized and automated, and down to the everything should kind of pilot itself there almost, right? But that he had to, like, with his own hand, grab the joystick, and land the plane himself, or land the craft himself, on this short time window.
16 seconds.
In 16 seconds, that's all real. Is amazing. Like, it's the most incredible story. I get goosebumps thinking about it. Like, it's.
Well, here, I'll give you your fact of the day, which most people are completely unaware of, and I only know this because of my father-in-law.
I mean, talk about people talk about the presence of mind to catch a football, like, in the end zone or whatever, and like,
And by the way, the chance of him having found that spot to land in were very low. Like, what he was able to, it was lucky. It was lucky that he actually landed level and landed in a place that, because they missed their landing site by, I think, 3/4 of a mile.
And he was able to do it under the most immense pressure ever. I mean, it doesn't get any higher than that.
Yeah. He was completely isolated, basically doing it. Yeah.
I have trouble, like, making good chess moves when the time is right. Like, meanwhile, it's amazing. Anyways, what were you saying?
So, you mentioned how everything was automated and everything.
Yeah.
So what people don't understand is, like, we all are familiar with, like, random access memory, like RAM, right?
Yeah.
So, which is basically a magnetized block, is basically the way you would look at it. That, depending on where the dipole is, you get a bit, a 1 or a 0, right?
Mm.
Well, they didn't have that for the LEM, and for I'm assuming for the command module too, but I only know about the LEM because my father-in-law worked on it. All the memory that was in anything that was built into the lunar lander was actually hand wired, braided copper wire, braided in a way so that it matched the programming. So if the programming wasn't perfect, there couldn't be any error in the code. They couldn't change anything because it was literally the RAM was hardwired by hand to write out the code effectively.
That's crazy.
Isn't that nuts?
That's wild.
So that was how that's how the memory was put together. So it was nothing like the. So when we think of memory today, again, we think of those little chips that if you think of a memory card that you put into something, what it really has inside of it, or even do I have one here? Oh, I thought I had a flash drive. I don't have a flash drive. But I do. Look, it's one of the ReesSpecht the Water
Nice.
flash drives. What this has inside of it is just a little piece of memory, which is really, like I said, a little magnetized block that, depending on the direction of the dipoles, the electromagnet in it, stores the information, which is a series of ones and zeros. And this, I think, is a 4 gig memory stick, and theirs was 130 bytes.
Bytes. That's crazy.
So
That's
it was hand wired.
That's insane.
And any mistake would render it useless.
That's nuts. Wow.
And that's what we use to put people on the moon.
Yeah. And now our technology is so much better. We can't do it now.
Right. Well, it's not that we can't do it. It's the will to do it's not there, because
we can't because it never
the
happened.
Program was literally 25% of our GDP.
Or we never went in the first place, and that's why we can't replicate it.
Oh my God! Don't go there.
But, I mean,
if you want to see angry rich, the social studies teacher on my team when I was teaching,
mm-hmm.
she told the kids that it's possible it was fake, and I went off on her. I'm like, number one, it wasn't possible. And I said, number two, the second you tell kids a conspiratorial idea is possible, they're going to go with it.
Right.
That'll become their reality. Just like, I was like, when I tell kids that they could face the floor, even though I tell them the probability is 0, I went into my room one day and there was a kid pushing on the wall. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, I'm trying to phase. I'm like, I told you it's not going to happen. You could do this for infinite lifetimes. It's still not going to happen. But whatever. And I went off on her. And to this day, we still joke about it, because she was like, "Oh, I'm just kidding." I'm like, "No, that's not that. Like, we did not fake it, So,
well, speaking of mistakes, there was a terrible accident that happened that we wanted to talk about.
Yes. So, and anytime I see these stories, it hits home. But this one literally hit home, because it was right here in the district that I taught in, actually, in Smithtown, New York. A 54-year-old grandmother left her 1-year-old granddaughter in the car, and she died from a hot car death. And the reason I mentioned this one is because I am a member of the multiple groups in the town of Smithtown, the parent groups. And I've been a member since I was a teacher. And I've continued staying in there, especially as I do the speaking, because I do a lot of it there. So what I found interesting and predictable was the outcrying against the grandmother, and what a terrible person she is, and how awful.
It's even worse than hot car deaths than it is for drowning.
It is. I've told you, we avoided that because of Superstorm Sandy, thankfully. There was very little of it. There was some, but for the most part, we avoided that. But with hot car deaths, and I don't know why. I don't know what
because with a hot car death, people think that the child was neglected. That you forgot your kid. The most important thing in the world, you forgot to take care of them, and which isn't the case. So, as you know, I exist in this space a little bit because I have an invention that I believe is the solution to this, and it probably would have saved this kid's life. You can find out more about it at L-squaredtechnologies.com, I believe. L-squaredtech.com. Thank you. Letter L, the word squared, tech.com, or the 3Rs.org. Because we have a system that we're not selling, that we wanted to be a standard for vehicles, where there's a sensor in the car seat, and that connects to the same technology that works with the key fob in everybody's vehicle. And if there's a child present in the car seat, and the temperature gets up to a certain level, then the car alarm goes off, the doors and windows, the doors unlock to the car, and most importantly, the windows roll down, which mitigates the temperature and brings the ambient temperature to a manageable level. And this would, save a lot of these. And so there is a great paper written by a psychologist named David Diamond, and he explains how there's this psychological phenomenon that can happen to anybody.
Yep.
Where you create a false memory, where you didn't forget your kid, you remember dropping them off at daycare.
Yep.
And there's dads who have gone to work and they're sitting at their desk and they're looking at a photo of their kid on the desk, hoping they're having a nice day at daycare, and meanwhile they're cooking in the car. And that's not because he forgot about them. He's thinking about them. He's looking at the picture. He's not being reminded like, oh crap, the kid. He has this honest memory of dropping them off because we do so much of our stuff on autopilot, and a lot of stuff we do is early in the morning when you're kind of half out of it anyways, and you're a parent, which means you probably don't sleep that well, and you've got all this stuff going on, and much like drowning, it can happen to anybody, but because most people don't understand the nuances of this very real psychological phenomenon, the vitriol from the community is at least equally bad, but probably much worse. I'm
going to say, based on what I saw, it's infinitely worse.
Yeah, which makes it really hard to solve the problem, because you can't sell a product. Like, that's why I don't want to sell anything, because no one's going to buy it, because no one is going to, even if they think they might do it, no one's going to admit to themselves and to the public that they might be a person who might forget their kid in the back of the car, right? So no one's going to buy it, because you can't tell that to yourself, or your husband, or your friends and family. And the other half of it is it's hard to get anything done with it, because whenever you bring up a solution, people say, well, no, just don't. How can you forget your kid anyways? Like,
right.
So yeah, it's a very hard problem to solve.
This is the age-old problem. It's very easy to argue from ignorance.
Right.
That's the easiest argument you'll ever make, because number one, you have an unlimited source of information you can use, which is all made up, and it's made up in your mind. That if I've made up in my mind that a responsible parent doesn't do this, or a responsible, guardian, in this case it was a grandparent,
right,
then it's easy to vilify them, because, oh no, that's not normal. How could you possibly, the most important thing in your life? And people have a very difficult time understanding the limits of our biology, especially when it comes to our brains. And I know when I do workshops with different organizations, I did this with you guys, where I show you, I prove it to you that your brain is built for confirmation bias. It's built in.
Right.
And I do that little demonstration where, with the cards, and you have to choose a number, and I'm not going to go into all right now. But universally, 95% of people choose the wrong combination, because it's built into our brains to do that. And people have a very difficult time understanding that we're not perfect, and that there are built-in biological issues that we have. And when it comes to the, it's actually related. I don't know if have you ever heard of inattentive blindness?
Oh, wait, maybe.
So inattentive blindness is the fact that your brain basically, your brain only has so much computing power.
Right.
So there's only so much computing power that your brain has. So your brain has safeguards to maximize kind of what you're doing at any given point. You can think of it like, have you ever gotten a file, and it's zipped? You have a zip file?
Yeah.
Right? Your brain does that. Okay? It zips. I'm by myself. Look at me.
Yeah, you're fine. Keep going.
Your brain basically zips information so that it's only dealing with what it has to deal with right now. And that's to keep down, your brain consumes more calories than any other part of your body. And so the whole point there is that your brain will kick in, especially when you have a routine. This mechanism kicks in even greater, so that your brain can minimize all the resources it has to send to conscious thought and calculations and all of these things. So when you have a specific routine that you do all the time, you can literally be on autopilot. And and that's all related. It's all part of the same phenomenon. And it has to do with how your brain compartmentalizes information and compartmentalizes its computing power. And the failure to grab the kid out of the car or drop them off at daycare has nothing to do with negligence. It has nothing to do with being a terrible human being, and it has everything to do with just the fault in the system. And there's nothing you can say other than it's a tragedy, and it happens more often than you would think it would, but it's predictable, sadly. And I feel for this grandmother in ways I can't even describe, because first of all, I've been on the other end of it in my own way. And I just, I got so depressed last night thinking about how the daughter feels towards her mother and what that is, and how do you live with that. And I remember going through that myself, like after we lost Reese, like, how can I talk to anybody? I mean, I was the one who was there, right? And how does anyone love me anymore, and how do people forgive me for what happened? And it's so that dug up, it digs up a lot when I feel that. And I want to reach out to the grandmother and let her know that it's not your fault, but the people with the pitchforks will be coming after you. And people want their pound of flesh, especially for things they don't understand. So it always makes me think of Frankenstein. We fear that which we don't understand, right? And it's a lot easier to criticize and point the finger of blame when it's something you don't quite comprehend. But as I always point out, whenever you point the finger of blame, there are 3 more fingers that point right back at you. So, yeah, it's sad. It's preventable. It's as preventable as drowning. It's not quite the same mechanism, but I think tangentially related to the whole, what we see with drowning. So yeah, I feel for them. I actually wrote in some of these message boards about how this woman is not a villain, and because people are, she's probably on drugs, and no, she's running on autopilot. And yeah, it's a terrible tragedy, and just like drowning is preventable. And I would say this: the root cause is still ignorance. Because if you're not aware of your own limitations, you're not aware of the dangers, you're not going to address them. You can't fix and you can't address that which you don't know you're supposed to address or fix in the first place. And if you think you know it all, that's the most dangerous place to be. That's why ignorance is so deadly and so dangerous.
My mom used to say, a little bit of knowledge is dangerous.
Yeah, exactly.
You think you know a little bit, but that's where you start to do.
Look at your mom. Your mom describing the Dunning-Kruger effect before it was actually written.
There it is. Yep.
Because that is the definition of the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yep. You
know a little bit about something, but not enough to actually understand it.
Right.
And then they think they know it though, and then they will argue as an expert. So.
It should have been called the Ruth Lupton effect.
Yeah. See, your mom missed out.
Yeah.
Oh well. You could kind of champion that. I will say this: I am pissed about something on our local radio station. There was a thing about at movie theaters getting butter to the bottom of your pre-filled popcorn bucket, and literally the day my movie theater installed those do-it-yourself popcorn butter things, I was like, this pisses me off. I can only put butter on the top. And I'm like, no. I grabbed a straw, I stuck it into the popcorn bucket, and used that to get butter to the bottom. And someone watched me do this and was like, oh my God, dude, that is genius. And I'm like, problem solving, that's what I do, right? On the radio yesterday, I heard them saying, oh, there's a great thing, you can do this. And I'm like, Samantha looks at me, she's like, you literally came up with that. And I'm like, I know, I did. That's the ReesSpecht maneuver. And now, do I think I came up with it and no one else did either. No, I think other people, that was a pretty, if you have any sense of problem solving, that would be a reasonable route to take with the available resources. But yeah, but
you just don't get any respect.
that's right. No respect.
No respect.
So speaking of no respect, I got, our last podcast, we talked about the grant writing thing that we were doing and how I thought it might be a scam, but I was pretty convinced it wasn't.
And I told you it probably wasn't. Yep.
Right. Well, it turns out it was. So speaking of no respect, I got totally scammed. It was a very long con and I found out that this is actually a thing. So hopefully if there's any of our other friends who are nonprofits, don't fall into this trap. There is a thing where you can get fake grant writers who will do seemingly good work for you just to get your financial information so that they can have the grants awarded to them. And they will put in their bank information if you're asking them to do this on your behalf, which I did. And it's, like I said, it's a long con. And con stands for confidence game. I had hired this person in particular steps. Now, when I found them on, it was I'm not even going to give the name of the website. I don't want to be sued for libel or anything. It is a free market gig hiring service. Let's just say that, where you can find freelance workers online.
Right.
And
it's like between 4 and 6 on the internet, We'll call it a Sixer.
Yeah, Sixer, exactly. And I had found this person, Laura Williams, and hired them first to write a proposal for our grant, for our programs. And if you recall, if you remember, since you're on the board, we did hire someone before that did a terrible proposal that I got a refund from Fiverr, actually. So that was great.
From Sixer?
Oh, I just said it. Oh well. Well, I didn't necessarily say that it was Fiverr for this other person, but no, Fiverr Fiverr was great. Everything that I needed through them, they did for us. So I should have continued working through them, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Which is where my protections were.
Right. Your problems were when you left Fiverr, really.
Yes, I did. So I did leave. I went off of Fiverr. But again, this was part of the con game, right? Confidence game. So yeah, we'd been taken advantage of by one person that, again, Fiverr made good. So then I went and hired this person who looked at what that other person did and said, "Oh yeah, I feel terrible for you," and gave me a deal. She's like, I'll write you a really great proposal, and I'll take some money off of it because of what you went through. I was like, oh wow, that's awesome, thank you. They did a proposal. I sent it to the board. The board unanimously agreed. No, it was a good proposal. Like, there's a couple things that needed to be edited, but we did it. And I was like, perfect. I'm happy with this. So then they offered to do a pitch deck for us, and they did that. And it was basically based off of the proposal. It wasn't that much, and that was great. And then did grant research for us, where they found 10 grant opportunities for the foundation. And then the coup de grace was, would you like us to do the applications for you? Because it's time, it's a time sink. It really is. It's a process. And I'm like, yes, I don't have the time. You've done wonderful work. So yes, will you do the applications for us? So I hired her for that. And about 3 days into the process on Fiverr, I get a message saying that, I'm sick of Fiverr nickel and diming me to death. Would you mind if we did this privately? I'll refund you your money on Fiverr, and we'll do it privately. And I said, sure. Didn't even think twice.
Right.
I'm like, fine. Actually, and in my head, because I'm an idiot, I'm like, I don't even have to pay the tip. Because on Fiverr, after you're done, you have to, you don't have to, but it's pretty much compulsory. You got to tip them. So I'm like, all right, I won't have to tip. That's great. Right? Being cheap. So sends me an invoice from a legit company that I looked up. I'm like, this looks legit, right? Okay. So now the one thing I will tell you, there was one warning sign that I did look up immediately. I could not find this person's name anywhere as a grant writer or anything like that. So I was a little skeptical. But I was like, there's nothing to tell me that there's anything to worry about. They've done this wonderful work for us, and that spoke for itself. So I figured, okay. And so she applied for 2 grants, that I got confirmation for. I'm like, okay, 2 down, 8 more to go.
Yeah.
And then about 2 days after I had gotten confirmation for the second grant, she sends me a text saying, I need, and for the second grant, she needed my driver's license and social security number, which I was a little skeptical of. So I actually looked, and I looked on the application website, and it did want my social security number. It didn't say driver's license, though. But I'm like, well, maybe you need that for something else. So I just gave them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and the social security number feels more, serious than the license number anyways. So you're giving one, not the other. And
Right. So I didn't think twice about it. So then I'm like, okay. And then the next day I get a message, oh, do you have an ID.me account? Which is, ID.me is basically a federally provided information service that this defines who you are online. And it's secure. And as long as you don't give it out, that's you can link everything to it. You can link your employment history, everything, your tax history, everything. So
I can get one. I don't have one.
Yeah. And it's really good. You use it like for authentication on your phone and everything. They have an app for, it's an authenticator too. So like you don't have to, anyhow, it could potentially be a gold mine for someone who wants to steal your identification though. Right. So she asked me, do you have one? And I was like, actually I do. And she's like, oh, okay. And I thought that was weird right there. Cause I'm like, it almost seemed like, wait, did you try to get one in my name? Like that was my first thought. I'm like, nah, that's not what it is. And she's like, well, I need your username and password. And I'm like, no. I'm like, it literally says on their website, do not give this out to anyone. I'm like, and so I texted her. I was like, I wouldn't give this out to my mother, much less you. So I was like, now I'm concerned. So and I reached out to you after that. And I asked the rest of our board, like, what do you think about this? And everyone pretty unanimously said, like, well, they've done all this work for you. Maybe it was just a breach of etiquette, right? And you and I even said, I mean, it's probably not Laura Williams from California.
Right. We all agreed probably with somebody from another country, and maybe they didn't quite understand the nuances of the American, right?
And my thing was I was okay with that based on the fact, it was all predicated on the fact that, well, I'm getting a good deal. So, and I'm trying to save money for the foundation. So, yeah.
I mean, you get what you pay for.
Right.
You pay what you get for.
Yeah, exactly. So, I expressed my concern, but I given them a second chance. And so, and the last I had spoken to you, because this was the last time we did the podcast, was almost a month ago. I said I was moving forward, and we're just going to do that. So it took a couple of days. She gets back to me. She said, "Okay." She decided she's going to put in some safeguards, and I had already freaked out though that night. So I had already signed up for identity protection, which basically shut down all my credit, shut down all my accounts, which caused other problems, by the way, which I didn't think about. And then I also denied them access to my Google Drive. Because I had given them access to the Google Drive for our 990s and some, logos and stuff and information about the foundation. Nothing sensitive, nothing you couldn't get in general. But I didn't want it. I was like, I don't want her having any access. So she finally reaches back out to me and says, we'll resume, but I won't put in anything that you're not approving. So we'll do it together. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm like, that kind of defeats the purpose because now I have to basically babysit you through this,
right.
But whatever.
Yeah.
I'll feel better. So yeah, let's do that. And I get a request to open the files, and it was from Victor Obawanje or something like that. And I'm like, I denied it. And then they asked again, and I denied it. And then right after that, I get Laura Williams. And I'm like, well, that's odd. So I looked up Victor Obawanje, and sure enough, it pops up, known Nigerian scammer. I'm like, oh my God. So I then came right out. I'm like, is this Victor? And they denied it. And then gave me some convoluted story that Victor was an associate of theirs. And I'm like, well, he shows up on Google search as a scammer in Nigeria. And and then I sent her to my website. This is where I got the idea, by the way, to check people. I sent her to my website to get something off of my website, which I had a tracker on it. And I could see where they were coming from. And sure enough, when she was speaking to me and said she was on our website, it was in Nigeria. And I'm like, so you're in California? She's like, oh yeah. I'm like, no, you're not. You're in Nigeria. And I said, and then you're Victor. And then I realized and ghosted me after that. And then we started getting requests. But thankfully, I had the stuff to block it.
Right.
People trying to open up stuff in my name. But I found out the real ultimate goal of them isn't even to do that, really. It's to get the financial information from the foundation so that, and the routing number and the bank and everything, so that they can actually have the money routed to their bank account if they do get the grants. So they'll do the work.
They really wanted to get the grant. Like that's actually real. Yeah.
They really do want to get the grant, which explains why. So now it all comes together. This is why they did all the work, because they wanted to get the grant, but they want the money. So talk about a long con. But thankfully I caught it. The money we spent, unfortunately, the money I had spent prior to that, I mean, I would say I got work done, right? So you and I both agreed, like, well, I mean, they did the work and I can use it. I mean, it requires some touching up, but I mean, I can use it. But the stuff that I did off of Fiverr, that was the issue. And because I wasn't protected by Fiverr, I did reach out to them, which they removed her right away, and they were great. And they said, we can take care of you for the other stuff. And I'm like, well, really, they did the work. I wouldn't feel, I mean, they did do the work, and it's not right. You shouldn't have to pay for it. And I wasn't going to go through all that. But it was the other money that we spent that was an issue. And I was hesitant to share it on I didn't want anyone to know. I was embarrassed. But we did a GoFundMe, and basically people covered our costs. So at the end of the day,
that's amazing.
Goodness won. And
you want to give a shout out to the landscaping company that assisted you?
I do. So I don't know what it is with me and landscapers.
Yeah, you get along with them.
So we have a local landscaping company here that's by me as well, Metamorphosis Landscape Design, and their owner basically covered what we were looking to get back, which was $1,600. And his name is Jason Mers, and he's a fantastic human being. And that night, he texted me saying, "Rich, I covered it." He's like, "If you ever need anything, just reach out to me first."
Wow.
And I told him, I said, I didn't want, I don't want to do that, because I don't want to, I didn't want my being taken advantage of becoming his being taken advantage of. You know what I mean? So,
right.
But they took care of us and made us whole. And then other people donated anyhow, even though we'd made our goal, which is great. I mean, and I'm going to keep it up, because hopefully, I mean, maybe people will continue to do that, and we can hire a real grant writer. So,
yeah, and you can get the money you need,
Yeah. And that'll help us, because the problem that got me here in the first place is I have come to the realization that, and I'm hard to admit this, that there's only so much I can do on my own. And I feel like I have maxed out my efficiency as a one-man show, doing what I do. I feel like I've reached equilibrium. There's only so much I can make and do on my own when with these programs and providing them and charging schools. And there's money out there for people to support a program like we have for both water safety and kindness, and really give us the funding that we need to kind of support the whole program, not just pieces of it. I mean, you guys sponsor our program nationally, and that's the money that helps us to do, that covers our travel costs, that covers, printing the cards. But there's more I'd like to do. I'd like to be able to provide the books, but I can't, because we just can't afford that. But with this, we could. I'd like to tell schools that don't have the money to pay for us, hey, we can come for free. Thanks to the generosity of, just like when you watch Sesame Street. This program was provided by a generous grant from, and that's what we want to do. So hopefully we can hire a real grant writer. I'm in talks with one. She's fantastic. She has wonderful references. I've spoken to her face to face. I can assure you she is not in Nigeria. By the way, I did send her to our website just to confirm where she was, and she is exactly where she said she was. And I caught another one trying to scam me, by the way. So on Fiverr, this one said she was from Baltimore, and it turns out she was from Lagos. But she helped us out. She gave us free resources. She felt bad and gave us free resources. So there's good people out there. I'm not knocking any other countries, and I'm not.
There's some really nice scammers out there. There's some really generous helpful scammers, and
Yeah.
you know they need to respect you.
Yeah. So that's my story.
Well,
But
you stick to it.
but I see everything as a learning experience. So and I've learned from it, and onward and upward.
What was I gonna say? Oh well, thank you for sharing that. That was riveting. And I'm sorry you had to go through that, but it seems like you're going to be all the better for it. So
I hope I always, like I said, I feel everything is there to give you perspective. So I have a new perspective and move on. And my dad always told me, and I live by this: can't change the past. So the only thing you have control over is right now. So,
and we did our science fact of the day.
Oh, we did multiple science facts of the day.
Yeah. So. Yeah, we had a 3-part episode. We did movie reviews. We talked about hot car, pediatric vehicular homicides, or heatstroke deaths rather, on homicides, and also your grant story.
Right, how not to be scammed as a nonprofit, especially a small one. And clearly this is a thing. So to my other nonprofit friends, be aware that this is a real thing. So
I might be having the best hair day of my life right now. This is my peak Eric's hair.
I'm pretty happy with my hair today.
You're doing great too. I like your hair a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe this is
the
best.
Glasses, but I have no.
I don't like the wheelchair, so if I had to pick an assistive device and it was between wheelchair and glasses, I'd take glasses. So you can shove it. Oh, I'm so sorry. I gotta wear glasses. So hard for me. Yeah,
I'm blind in one eye too. I'm not comparing, by the way.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you about the guy that walked up to me at the grocery store?
Yes.
And he was.
Tell the story again because it's great.
For the audience, this guy. I'm in line at Publix to get a pub sub, which, by the way, is one of the best parts of living in Florida. Public subs are amazing. And while I'm waiting for my chicken tender sub with honey mustard, mayonnaise, and American cheese, and tomatoes, he comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, man, my name's Robert, and I gotta let you know that I really understand, what you're going through, the whole wheelchair thing, the disability. I get it, because I am actually missing a toe on my left foot. I'm missing my middle toe. So I get it, man. You and me, we're the same boat." I look at him like, I literally was like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, glad to have someone who understands like you do. Right? Thanks for sharing, man. You it means a lot. I'm not alone. And he's like, yeah, right. He goes, I'm glad you. Yeah, awesome. He fist bumped me and he walked away. And I looked at my friend. I'm like, what in the world? Like, who do you think? Like,
it was genuine, right? It was totally
super genuine. Yeah. And he crossed he saw me and he made his way, he crossed the store to come to share this with me because he really wanted me to know, that him and I had a bond.
Well, I believe that when you told me that story, I told you the time that someone reached out to me saying that they related to me because they had just lost their dog. And I remember reading him like, you just lost your dog. And I lost my son. Yes, very similar. And I remember how I felt, which was kind of how I just relayed now. But my response, I was like, any loss is difficult. And I'm trying to be kind about it, but I'm like.
Right, because, I mean, losing a dog sucks.
It does. I've lost 5 of them, so I know.
Right, yeah, I've lost dogs. It's not great, but I'm not haunted by the loss of my dog every day.
Right.
It's not. It didn't impact me for the rest of my life.
Well, and I will say similarly, people try to relate saying they lost a parent, and I'm like, still not the same. I've lost my father. That was very hard. It was, and I do think of my dad every day, but it's not even comparable.
No, I
lost a child. It's like literally having a piece of your soul ripped away from you. I don't know how to explain it.
After both parents, I still wouldn't even fathom comparing. It doesn't make sense.
But I'm not here to judge. And I go, one of my favorite quotes, and I think something good to end on, is from Aesop. Everyone's fighting a hard battle. Just be kind. So
I agree with that. Speaking of fighting hard battles, are you going to join us for Jeopardy?
I may be able to today.
We've been fairly on time lately at 3 p.m.
Now, you saw the streak going?
Yeah.
Wow.
You would join us at 77.
Holy crap, 77.
Yeah, we had to beat Abby and Rich yesterday. I told you for 76.
Well, you know, look at me then.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as the rich guy got one, like a dumb one wrong, like, oh, that's not him. That's for sure.
It was in the first three.
Yeah, one of the first.
And you know it's not me because I don't have Alexa. So and
There you
it's only on Alexa. They don't have it on Google anymore.
Yeah, you can go to the website, but yeah. So yeah, come join us if you can.
All right, at 3
I would
o'clock.
love 3 o'clock. Yeah, I'd love to have you here ring in the double digits with me. Or the 77, the same digit.
If I'm around, I will join.
Sounds good.
I may have to pick up my cousin today, but I should be around. So.
Wait, actually, let me calendar. We might be delayed because don't I have a thing?
Oh no.
Oh no. Yep, at 3 o'clock's perfect. Actually, I have a.
All right.
Yeah. I do have a meeting at 3:30, but we'll
And you know what? Even if I can't join, for the two people watching, you can watch.
Please tune in.
All right, my friend.
I think the same person who watches this also watches Jeopardy already. So yeah, she watches. She's a big fan of all those things. So.
Well,
oh, and I mentioned her today in the podcast because I talked about her son.
Oh.
I should tell her; she'll be excited.
Now, I do want to point out I will actually be available next week too, which is crazy.
Oh my God, Mike, did you hear that?
We might be able to do 2 weeks in a row.
Wow.
Now, I'm going to be, I have to full disclosure. I will not be here the following Thursday.
Will I be here? No, yeah, it looks like I'm here too. So, holy cow.
Oh my God, we make it 2 weeks in a row of child safety source.
Crazy.
What are we going to talk about?
I don't know.
Maybe can we get the guest that we talked about yesterday?
What was the guest?
Oh my God.
I'll remind you.
This now represents 2 times you've forgotten the connection.
One of the newest child safety TikTokers.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yep. I have a terrible memory, and it's getting worse with my age.
Well, as I said, I forgot David Cornsweat, so.
Well, that you should not be forgiven for that, obviously.
No, I shouldn't.
But yeah, I think between lots of drugs and aging, my memory is faltering rapidly.
It happens.
So, yeah. Apparently,
you listen to Nancy Reagan.
Yeah, age and narcotics is not a good combination. So, but
see, Nancy Reagan was right. But then, what's my excuse, Eric?
Just age.
I guess.
I mean, you are much older than me. You were born in the 70s.
I know, and according to my daughter, that was ancient times.
I mean, at least I was born in the 80s. It's like a whole different era.
Yeah.
They had changed their clothes and everything by then. I was telling a buddy of mine that if they came out with the Wonder Years today, and it was the same amount of time as it was back when we watched it, it would be set like in the 80s.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
No, it'd be set in the 90s now.
Oh, no, the 90s. I'm sorry. I meant the 90s. Yeah.
That's to me is crazy. Like
the 90s, which at the time, whenever I hear the 90s, the 90s to me equal like hip and new.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was. Like, oh, it's the 90s. It's it's cool. Yeah.
Yep.
But apparently the 90s are no longer hip nor new.
No.
Apparently they're quite old. Oh man, we're all gonna die. All right.
Speak for yourself. I plan on living forever.
I know you do. You're doing a good job of it too.
And like I tell my students, as long as I figure it out before I go, I'm good to go.
Well, you let me know. Take me with you because I don't want to die. So.
I still got another day to figure it out.
Take heart because there are some Gen Zers who are embracing 90s culture and looking back on it as like a golden era that they missed out on.
Oh, Eric, I meant to share with you. I'm going to give you one more science fact before we go. There is a new study out, and it was done by, I forget which research group did it, but they are using a combination of electrostimulators and AI, and they have successfully reconnected neural connections to people with quadriplegia, restoring motor function to their muscles
I don't know if that applies to me, but that's kind of cool though.
Well, yeah, I mean, yours isn't. Well, in some ways, it could actually.
Mhm.
So,
That's interesting.
and there's also research on with stem cells repairing atrophic muscles.
That, on the other hand, would be interesting.
That
And
would definitely apply to you.
according to a neurologist, I don't even have a brain injury, which is hard to believe. But
Okay, but you do.
yeah, clearly. Yeah, he told me. We did a brain scan. I was just checking things up just for the heck of it. And this neurologist is like, yeah, you have no brain injuries. I'm like, obviously I do. And he's like, no. He goes, you must have gotten your cerebral palsy genetically. I was like, that's not a thing. He's like, oh, sure, it happens. I'm like, what? And I looked it up, and the internet was also like, no, that's not a thing. So I don't know what this neurologist is smoking, but I don't go to him anymore.
I've had doctor. We tend to think doctors are infallible. I had a doctor. I went once. I had poison ivy on my arm, and she's like, "Oh, I don't want to touch the blister," and I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "I don't want to get poison ivy." I'm like, "That's not how it works." I'm like, "I've washed, I've showered." She's like, "No, the blister can trans." I'm like, "No, it can't." I'm like, "It's the aerosol oil that comes from the actual plant."
It's the actual ivy, yeah.
And I'm like, she's like,
You
"No,
added
the
that.
blisters have the oil in it." I'm like, "No, they don't. They absolutely 100% don't."
Yeah, unless it's still on you, but yeah, no.
And she fought me to death on it. I'm like, I actually have some expertise in this. So I then emailed her after, because this is who I am. But she wrote back to me. She's like, I stand corrected. And I'm like, I didn't mean to be rude or anything. I just that you were wrong. So,
well, I've been getting to tell people something that's absolutely correct, but also misleading because of the connotation that it normally comes with. But I'm currently undergoing chemotherapy.
well, okay. So, what drug are you on?
Flurinol, I forget what it's called. Fluorovinyl, something like that. So I saw a dermatologist on Sunday. They came to my house because I have this amazing medicine doctor plan now. And the dermatologist looked me over, and I had these concerns about these red little spots on my arm. And typically, how this normally goes, every dermatology story I've ever heard has gone like this. I was worried about these spots I had, on my body somewhere, this dot or whatever it was. And I went to the dermatologist, and the dermatologist looked at it like, nope, that's fine. But this other thing over here that you thought was totally fine, that's a problem.
Right.
And that's how every dermatology story goes. Everybody has the exact same story. I was worried about A, but it turns out A is fine, but B over here is a serious issue, or at least an issue of some kind. So I expected this to be my case. I was going to show her my thing, and she was going to be like, no, that's fine. But this thing over here, that you got to look out for. So she does the full body mapping. We looked at every inch of my body, which was a good time. And I point out the things to her. She's like, yeah, no, that's precancerous. That's that will eventually become a squamous cell carcinoma.
Squamous.
Squamous. Okay. And by the way, I don't know which are the good ones and bad ones.
So squamous and basal cell carcinoma are the least dangerous ones.
Okay.
It's the melanoma. That's the one you have to worry about. In fact, if you had to order them, I'd say basal cell carcinoma, least dangerous, squamous cell, a little bit more, but not as much. And then melanoma on a whole other level.
Okay. So I have
you hear that word melanoma, you freak out.
Yeah. So,
by the way, if you ever want you want a dermatologist to treat you well, instead of saying I have a weird looking mole, say I have a discolored and misshapen nevus.
Nice. Okay. I'll let her know that.
Yeah. No, they'll be like, oh, it's a man of science.
Yes.
No, they will. They will treat you totally different.
Well, I showed her my red spot, and she's like, "Yeah, that's a precancerous squamous cell carcinoma." And she gave me a topical ointment, which apparently is a form of chemotherapy, but it's a cream and not injected into you or ingested in some way.
Well, so it's interesting to say that because I would be remiss if I didn't point out that any drug regimen you're on is a form of chemotherapy. Except we use that term colloquially for cancer treatment. So if you are on a medication that you have to take continually that prevents the metastasizing or dividing of cancer cells, that is technically a form of chemotherapy. So,
I mean, she told me that this cream is a chemotherapy. The cream. And she's like, make sure whoever puts it on you wears gloves. Like it's don't fuck around with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm currently undergoing chemotherapy, and everybody should give me I should get free pity and gifts, and as I undergo this terrible trial through my chemo.
Or if you'd like to donate to a foundation in Eric's name in support of his trials, you can go to the GoFundMe located at ReesSpechtLife.com.
That's an option. I've already started. My lady friend was noticing that I had a lot of hair falling out, so I told her it's because of the chemo. I'm already going bald, and which would be a real shame because I have this luscious hair right now. We keep noting, but yeah. So I'm currently going to chemotherapy. I also have another cyst thing that we're treating as well, where I got injections into a cyst in my groin with cortisone.
That sounds like a fun time, Eric.
Oh man, between the finding out I have precancerous cells in my arm and getting injected in my groin, it was a lovely time. But I will say, it was in my house, and I didn't have to go to a doctor's office. And the lady was very nice.
That's awesome.
And I got the injection while laying in my bed at my home. And I will take that any day over being naked on a doctor's table, in some office somewhere, So on a piece of paper or whatever, I had my blanket, and it was great. So
that's awesome. I'm jealous.
Yeah. So check it out. This guy started this company, Upland Health, that provides concierge medical service where doctors come to you because it's a common thing in New York, and he was surprised that it wasn't in Florida. So apparently, you could find a similar service up by you.
But you got to be careful when you say New York, because I think when
it could be the city, right?
The city,
right. But also, I mean, Long Island is an affluent area, so maybe it's a similar thing.
Well, you tell someone you live on Long Island, they think that's the island that Manhattan is.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's stupid.
No, Eric, it's pervasive and it's countrywide. When I tell people I live on Long Island, they're like, "Oh, what's it like living in the city?" I'm like, "I don't. If I show them pictures of my house, I'm like, I live in one of the most rural areas on Long Island. I mean, I'm literally surrounded by trees and woodland, and yeah. So, ignorance, right?
It's bliss. But yeah, so I have this amusing healthcare, which I'm now, by the way, just to pat myself on the back, we're offering to key lifesaver employees. So key lifesaver employees now also get in-home medical treatment where they can call the service, and a doctor will come day or night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to their home within an hour. They can call or text a doctor anytime of day and get responses immediately. So if you don't want to see the doctor, you just want to text them a picture of the mole on your leg or whatever, they can do that.
I'm asking for a friend. How does one become a key lifesaver employee?
Well, you got to be a lifesaver employee and then go from there. But, maybe if Abby finishes her project, we can, she can figure that out.
Oh yeah. Let me get her through college first.
Well, maybe
she already asked. She's like, "Why do I have to do this?" And by the way, she uttered your name.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. She's like, "Well, Eric didn't go to college, and look at him." And I'm like, "This is not the same situation, Abby." And I was like, "And you're not nearly as motivated as Eric was." So
that might be true.
Yeah. Right. And she didn't want to hear that.
Well, so maybe Abby works here one day. You never know.
Hey, she works somewhere. I said, listen, as long as you can support yourself and you don't need a man to support you, I don't care.
Or a woman.
Or a woman, yes. So
I hear you.
Or a non-binary individual.
If you don't need a partner to support you.
Right. A partner. I'm sorry. I got to get with the times here.
Thank you.
But you got to forgive me. I was born in the ancient times.
You were born in the 20th century.
Way back in the 1900s.
Way back in the 1900s, yeah.
Right in the 1900s. That's right. Back in before the wheel was invented.
Right.
So, well, this was real, and it was fun.
Maybe not real fun, but yeah, it was great.
I had fun. I don't care about you.
I always have fun with you.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
You made my day. I feel lovable and capable now.
Well, you're at least one of those things.
Yeah. All right. So I may see you for Jeopardy. I'm going to try.
Yeah,
to make it. And
that'd be exciting.
if not, we're on for next Thursday.
Sounds like a plan, dude.
All right, dude.
And,
So hopefully see you in a couple hours.
yeah, let me know if you need anything.
All right, I will.
Right.
All right. Bye,
All right,
everybody.
we'll see you Thursday.